Welcome, everyone. I'm Jaress,
And Patrick?
and you are listening to Opus Robusto. Opus Robusto is for cigar aficionados, whiskey enthusiasts, and classical music admirers. Our goal is to articulate the musicality, genius, artistry, and magic of classical music in a way that's accessible to the beginner as well as the musically accomplished alike, all while enjoying a great cigar with a glass of whiskey. Sit back, light up, and enjoy a relaxing evening or day, because it's day actually, daytime with us as we discuss music and cigars. Bottoms up.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Well, it's been a hot second since we've had our last episode, Jaress.
It has. It's been like almost a year. Almost a year.
Wow.
September
What has
21st.
happened in your life? Like why the we both know it's mostly my fault, but I mean, come on, Jaress. Why haven't we done this sooner?
Well, it's been both. You've been super busy. You started up a new thing that you can talk about, I guess, in a couple minutes. And we moved. So we talked about this before, I think, but we're based in Jersey. But we moved to a different house. It's we call it our COVID house. It was the house that we just decided to up and buy. And we're renting out our other house. And so it was about, I think the last episode that we did was about a month before we actually made the move. So it's been a while. We've been here for, I think we moved in last October. So we've been busy. I just got a new job yesterday. So that's also going to be, things that's different for us. But what about you? What have you been doing?
Yeah. Well, as Jaress mentioned, I kind of started up a new thing with my wife. I still have my daytime job of being a music educator, choral director at a local high school here in Bakersfield, and but we have heard of this movement, and it was definitely Twin Cities, Minnesota, and they had this really great event that they would hold, like I think almost weekly, where I mean hundreds of people would show up, just sing random drinking songs and have beer, have fun, socialize. And my wife and I were just kind of we frequent a local brewery here in Bakersfield, and thought, why don't we start something like that here? That would be fun. And so the idea kind of took off, and I think, what do we have, like 5, 6, 7 beer choirs later, in the year 2021, 2022, here we are. We're kind of full running this thing, and we do it about monthly. A lot of fun.
It's fun.
A lot of singers from around show up, but of course a lot of people who don't sing normally. It's just kind of making singing not this thing in America where it's like it's only for people who can sing, should sing, and it's only for performances. And that's nonsense in most places. Around the world, singing is just part of culture, and for some reason it's got a weird thing here in the States, but trying to bring it back, get people singing again, having a good time, drinking some beer, people who wouldn't normally. Actually, I'm wearing my my Great Change t-shirt today. That's the brewery we usually go to, and
free plug for them.
But yeah, no, I mean, yeah, they're right. If you're in Bakersfield, check out the brewery, for sure. But no, I mean, so that's been a lot of my extra time from work to kind of put my energy towards that. So I think that's kind of another reason why we've prolonged our what is this, our 5th episode?
I think so.
Yeah.
One,
So
two, three,
excited
four,
to,
five. Yep.
yeah. What are we learning today about today? What are we listening to today, Cheers?
Today we are going to do let's see what have we done before. So recap for everyone. We did the Nani and Gesang der Patzen, the first one. Then we did two violin
Brahms.
concertos back to back. Yeah, the Nani
Mm-hmm.
and the Gesang are Brahms pieces. And then we did the Glazunov, and then we did the Sibelius violin concerto, and then we did Ron Keen's American Mass. So that was back in September of last year. We had a guest for that one, Dr. Ron
Mm-hmm.
Keen himself. Today we are going to do the Haydn Symphony number 94. We have
Mm.
yet to do a symphony. So I thought
Yeah.
this would be cool. And I actually, so I threw some questions out, and I can ask my questions now before we jump into the whiskey and cigar talk, but maybe we can just kind of chat. Okay, so I don't know. I'm sure you know the answers to this. I honestly didn't. So
Uh-oh. I
what
didn't
I'm
see
what
your
I'm
question ahead of time.
yeah, it's all right. If you don't know, I guess we'll research it. But
Wow.
okay, so um Haydn number it says symphony number 94. Does that really
Mm-hmm.
mean that this guy wrote 90 plus 100 plus maybe symphonies, or is that like the 94th piece that he wrote like overall and doesn't have to be a symphony? Like what does that mean, 94?
That is a fantastic question, Jaress. I do know the answer to that. He wrote 104 symphonies. Yes, symphonies in their whole completion. Usually anywhere ranging from like 15 to 30, 40-minute works. 104 of them.
Jeez. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll probably get into some of the history and stuff of what he did for this symphony, but like that's crazy to me. I mean, this piece is
Well,
four
the,
movements. Good.
well, I was just gonna say. I mean, they didn't have cell phones and you know TikTok back in the day, so
Yeah.
they had some time on their hands to figure some stuff out. But he was a hired musician, right? And I'll talk about his biography here in a second. But he, um, I mean, that was his daytime job, was put stuff together, figure it out.
Wow. I mean, this piece is it's four movements. The recordings that we're going to use today, the first movement is 10 minutes and 4 seconds. The second movement is 6 minutes and 52 seconds. The third movement is 5 minutes and 29 seconds, and the fourth movement is 4 minutes and 1 second. I
Shortest.
just like
Yeah.
I don't know. I when I think about the amount of time and the lack of technology at that time to be able to write a full symphony and literally just have it in your mind, right? Because like today, if you or I were writing a piece of music, we'd, get on Finale or Sibelius or Dorico or whatever, and we would,
Right.
plunk out the things that we'd want to hear. And if there was something that we wanted to update for the flute, we could change the flute part and then we could play it. We could hear the flute player, the virtual flute player play it, right? Like, but he didn't have any of that.
Yeah.
Like he's probably sitting at a piano and listening to all this stuff in his head and just writing it down. Like it's crazy to me.
Well, it wasn't. It was even challenging to write too. I mean, um, it's not like we have we have pencils with erasers. It was a lot harder to like write and to cross off mistakes and erase. Like that was more of a challenge back in the day too. So if he wrote it down, it was like, yeah, I guess we're gonna have to stick with that. That's okay. I want to change it. I don't have an eraser. No, I mean, of course, there's trial and error with any composition, but yeah, no, a lot of, like you said, a lot of it was in their heads.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Um, well, why don't you
What are
talk
we
us
what are we
through?
drinking?
Oh, you want to do that? All right.
Well,
I
let's
have
yeah, let's start with alcohol, because you know, for me it's 11 o'clock here in Bakersfield,
yeah, that's
and
true.
perfect time to start, with the hard stuff. What are you drinking, Cheers?
So I've actually got two today. So
Wow.
sometimes I like
I think that's
to,
against the rules.
is it? I don't know. I feel like it's our show. We can do whatever we want, right?
Okay.
Um, so sometimes I like to start with one type and then finish with a different type. So what I'm starting out with today is this J&B, and I've got a story for you for this. It's J&B Rare. You can see, I don't know if you can see the stamp here. It says duty free. Um, so I went to an estate sale a couple months ago here in Jersey. One of my buddies was cleaning out the place, and he called me and he was like, "Hey, you want to come over? There's like a bunch of stuff." So it's like, sure. So I went over there and I found probably two cases of this J&B stuff. Um, and I ended up buying probably about a case and a half. I think we spent $250 like total, and like we got a case and a half of the J&Bs. We got I mean a number of different like cooking things, and you know, Cyrus, my son, got like a bunch of like little knickknacks and all that kind of stuff. So we made out like on this deal, and I came back, I came home with 18 bottles of this you know, J&B Rare. But um
Wow.
it's, I mean, it's, I wouldn't say it's the best thing I've ever had. Um, but I was doing a little bit of research into it. It's actually made from 42 different types of malt and grain whiskeys.
Mm.
It's pretty, it's pretty, I mean, it's on the paler side. I think it used to be paler than this, but this bottle that I have, I wouldn't be surprised if it's from the 60s. Um, it's like
Wow.
it's pretty old. Let's see, it's matured in oak casks for a minimum of 3 years. And I would say like it's a little on the sweeter side. So that's what I'm starting with. Um, and then I'm finishing off when we actually light up and stuff with a mezcal. Patrick, you and I actually had this in person together last week. But I got this
That's right.
mezcal. It's
That was nice.
artesanal espada pequeña, and you can only find it, I think, at Trader Joe's. It's a, well, I don't know. I think you can only find it at Trader Joe's. It's a Trader Joe's type of deal there. So I was again doing a little bit of research because I love mezcal, and I really like tequila, especially the top end of like, you know, the añejos tequilas.
Right.
So I was trying to do some research into figuring out like what is it, you know, what makes it a mezcal versus a tequila, and I learned that
Right.
mezcal is actually the overall term for mezcal and tequila. Like mezcal is kind of when you take agave and you smoke it,
Right.
is basically, you know, you not
That's
smoke it like a
mezcal.
cigar, but so technically tequila is a type of mezcal in the same way that bourbon is is a type of whiskey.
Okay.
I didn't know that. I learned that. Mezcal refers to the liquor that's made from agave plants, and it's produced in certain Mexican states whereas tequila is actually made only from blue agave, and is produced in one Mexican state and a few municipalities. So that's the mezcal that I'll be finishing out the cigar with. It's a great one if you're
Mm.
close to a Trader Joe's that has it. I would highly recommend you pick it up. Super smoky, just great flavor. What
If
about
you
you?
want to know any kind of alcohol that Trader Joe sells, you just ask Jaress, and he'll point you in the right direction.
That's
uh,
probably true. I think the
I'm
last time we
actually
did
having
this,
a
think the last time we did this, I used a Trader Joe's liquor as well. So anyway,
no. I love it actually. I've been meaning to go there and get a couple of your recommendations there, Jaress. I'm having a California local. It's from Redwood Empire. It's up in Sonoma, and they've been in existence since I think 2017. Um, and it's this is the Emerald Giant Rye whiskey, and so I came across this at a there's a local gas station here called Sully's, and I'm always looking. They always have something different, something maybe local, and And I was like, yeah, I'll give it a try. It's actually one of the nicest ryes for the price I've ever had. So it's really fantastic. Aged 4 years, um, and like I said, from Redwood. So the Emerald Giant is referring to this tree. You go down a winding trail along this creek, and you come across this. It's called like the August redwood, which is like the fastest growing redwood, and that's kind of what this is, what referring to this tallest tree in this forest called the Emerald Giant, and that's what it's named after. But no, it's really nice. It's got a spicy front with a nice smooth finish. It has more flavor complexity than most ryes, I would say. Sometimes ryes can be one note. This to me has um I don't know, it just has a lot more going on than for the price, especially than I would normally see in a rye. So it's really tasty.
Sounds good. We had that last week, right? Didn't we
Yes,
have a
and
little bit of that?
so
Yeah.
you had, just like I had your mezcal, you had a little bit of this one, yeah.
So last week, my family and I were visiting California for, well, we were in Bakersfield for about 9 days, and of course, made a point to hang out with Patrick and his wife for a couple of occasions. Um,
Yes.
um, but in any case, what are you smoking? What are you gonna light up?
All right. Well, I, I'm gonna do something a little bit more commonplace, but it's a newer label from Romeo and Julieta. So this one is this blue label, which came out in May 2020, kind of in the peak of that COVID um, hibernation we all kind of went through. But yeah, this is called Reserva Real, Nicaragua, and it got like 92 points in Cigar Aficionado. So this is, I think, the first time I'll be smoking this. So I just wanted to try something new. Supposedly, it's kind of a medium to full body going on, and obviously Nicaraguan. This is a Toro, um, and yeah, I mean it's kind of lighter in color though. It's a nice smooth looking wrapper here. You don't really see much of the seams, so yeah, I don't know. I'm really excited to smoke it. What do you smoke?
So I think we mentioned in a previous episode that I have a humidor that is actually a converted wine fridge.
Yes.
All of my cigars are gone. I have, I have smoked all of
Didn't
them.
you at one point have like 200 some?
I don't know if I had that many, but maybe like 130 to 150, like
Oh,
somewhere
okay.
somewhere in that range. I mean, 200. What kind of a fiend do you think I am? Um,
Yeah, I sorry, didn't mean to offend.
So yeah, all of them, pretty much all of them are gone. The only ones that I have left are these massive 7x70s. If you're not familiar with cigar
Wow,
gauges, it's
that's
massive.
pretty.
It's basically so the first number seven is the length, right? So it's a seven
Right.
inch cigar. Um, and the gauge is the next number, so it's basically the girth. And it's I mean, I generally I like to stick with about 660s. That's what I'm going to smoke today. But a
Okay.
770 is, I mean, that's probably for me, that's like a 3.5 hour cigar. So um,
Oh, that's gotta
I
be,
opted
yeah, at
to,
least four. Shoot.
yeah. So I went over to the one of the cigar shops that I actually recently found, and I picked this up. It's number 6. It's a Rocky Patel.
Oh, okay.
I actually had it yesterday. Uh, it's it's really good, so I got it again. Um,
Perfect.
so when I guess when a cigar manufacturer comes up with a new cigar, they kind of come up with a number of different recipes. I would think like similar to the way that a chef would do that, right? Like they're going to come up with a dish and probably come up with maybe slightly different variations on it and see which one is the best. Um, so the reason why they call this cigar number six is because it was the sixth iteration of this particular blend of tobaccos. Um, and it's the one that they ended up shipping. And it's great. It's got a Corojo wrapper, grown in Honduras. It's kind of got some. The description for the from the Rocky Patel site says it's got a honey note, layers of vanilla, coffee, earth, and bread. Um, Medium bodied. It's actually 95 rated, and it was number 9 cigar of the year in 2020. Um, like I
Oh,
said, I had it yesterday, loved it, went to go pick it up about an hour ago. So so we
there
could
you
do
go.
this show with it.
Perfect.
All right.
All right. Light up.
Light up. My cigar's got a, a band on the foot here. So um all right. So as we jump into Haydn, what did you what do you have to what do you have to tell us about Haydn, Patrick?
Well, appropriately, he is named as you were talking about with his 104 symphonies. He's kind of like he has the nickname of the father of symphonies, the father of the symphony, and but he was also really well known for his string quartets, actually. So, in fact, some argue that his string quartets are kind of the more standard. Um, he and Mozart at one point were um, they were friends, or they were kind of inspired by each other's works, but um, I read that Mozart actually learned a lot of first string quartet based on um, Haydn's ability to write them. So am I cutting out a little bit? Sorry about that.
You are cutting out a little bit, but I
But
think we got most of it. Um, I actually really enjoy the Haydn. Can you hear
get
me
the
okay?
the gist of that. Yeah, I mean, he was. Oh, yes.
I think, yeah, there's just a little bit of a delay here. So the Haydn string quartets actually like we so so Lauren, my wife, she plays viola. I actually bought her a viola at the end of 2019 for Christmas, and obviously not knowing what COVID, that COVID was going to happen. And so a couple months later, there was like the only thing that she was really able to do, because she's really a choir nerd, as I like to call her. But of course, choirs
Right.
shut down right during COVID. So she basically picked up the viola that I gave her
Right.
just 3 months before that. And now, fast forward a couple years, we're at a point where, because my youngest son plays cello, my oldest son plays violin, I play violin, and now with Lauren playing viola, we've got a string quartet, and we've played through
You got a
a
quartet in
couple
house.
of yeah, and we've played through a couple of Haydn's string quartets. They're a blast. Like, they're
Mm-hmm.
really fun.
Yes. No, for sure. Yeah. So I mean, his output for string quartets is just as extensive as symphonic. Um, but like I said, I mean, this guy that was his full-time gig. Was you sit down, you write stuff, and yeah. So anyway, he's a Austrian composer. At an early age, he was kind of the family moved to Vienna, He spent about 9 years at this choir school, which he got a lot of performance practice kind of under his belt through that. But they didn't teach him much music theory, and he was really interested in writing, but he was just kind of um, undertaught in that particular area. So he kind of self-taught until, and this is like he's 17, 18, 19, and then he meets this Italian composer slash singing teacher, Nicola Porpora, and kind of gets, some he like accompanies him for his singing lessons, but also gets a lot of good composition lessons from him. And by the time he's 26, he's got his first gig that's big. He's in front of an orchestra, and that's where he writes his first symphony for this orchestra. And so the 104 symphonies begins, but this particular little community orchestra thing kind of ran out of money, and so but he was hired by the Esterházys, which is this really big, wealthy, influential family in Austria, and so he starts as kind of an assistant director, does a lot of the church music there, writes a lot of chamber music, but also kind of continues on with some symphonic works here and there, and operas too. I mean, like he wrote everything that any classical composer was doing. He dabbed in all of it, and eventually, fast forward, because I don't want to give his whole bio, but the one of the main, or the prince, Miklos, I was trying to remember his name. He dies in like 1790, and
Spoiler
that's
alert.
when, yeah. Oh, sorry. Yes. Okay. Why'd you say that?
I just didn't know he died.
Oh, well, I mean, the Esterházys live on, but uh and so the guy that like takes over the house not as into music as Prince Miklos, and so he has a little bit more freedom to travel because he works for this house until he dies, basically. But he has freedom to travel, and he goes to England, and this is where I mean, he's pretty famous um, at this point anyway. This is later in his career, but especially he especially travels to Britain because he's especially famous over there. And so anyway, this is where he writes another set of symphonies, um, and uh, including the Surprise Symphony. That's where I was gonna head towards, and I'll jump ahead so we can start listening here.
A surprise
29
symphony.
of his 100.
Sorry, the surprise symphony is I guess the colloquial name for 94, right? It's kind of a nickname.
Right. It's Symphony 94, and I was just gonna say 29 of his 104 have names, just because they were well known for whatever reason. And but the surprise, this is why it's called the Surprise Symphony, and we don't want to spoil this, right? Because the second movement is where you get the surprise. But essentially, that's why it got its name, given by the English audiences, because of the sudden chord that you'll hear in the second movement. But this chord was added on a whim. Well, no, I'm sorry. I should say the chord was already written, but the fortissimo was
interesting
added on a whim for the premiere performance at a London premiere in March 23, 1792.
Was he conducting it?
I think so.
Okay.
And I think this plan was devised to wake up the snoring patron
Oh
in
my
the front
gosh.
row. So the English audiences are kind of known for their like, all right, you know, they've been drinking, just kind of relaxing and getting a little sleepy, and so they were kind of known for their sleepy attitude towards these kinds of concerts, and so that's what the whole point was, to wake them up in the second movement, and that's why
Wow.
it was known as the Surprise Symphony.
Very cool.
Well, should we start? Should start listening. How's your
Let's do
cigar?
it. It's great. Awesome. How's yours?
Smooth, yeah. It's unfortunately my humidor has been. If you don't know climate in Bakersfield, it's a little warm.
A little
So
bit.
this is not the cigar's fault, but it's definitely my fault that the got a little flaky here on the mouth. But that's, like I said, that's my fault. I mean, other than that, it's got a good flavor profile. Kind of, I mean, it's got a nice little buttery finish to it, actually. So, it's not it's pretty smooth for a medium full body,
Awesome. Sounds
which I
good.
like.
All right. Here is Haydn Symphony 94, number 94 in G major.
So yeah, there's 4 movements. So we're gonna hear
Yep.
the first one, which is I'm trying to remember,
Adagio.
and forgive me, Adagio. Yeah. Well, no, it starts Adagio, but no, it's actually um Vivace.
Oh,
So
okay. I couldn't see the
you'll
full
hear this
title on my own.
introduction here, and
Oh,
then
yes. Yes, you're right. I'm excited. All right. Here we go.
so here we go. Yeah, let's. Interesting is there's no real relationship between the introduction material and the main thing.
Interesting. Yeah. There's that Vivace.
Nice, mellow. Here it is. So
I like this little scale here. It's cool.
Mm.
And here we head back to the beginning again. Well, beginning of the vivace.
Yeah. This is part of the the movement. It's the sonata form, so it starts with what's called an exposition. That's kind of like establishing the main ideas. And to me, I hear like a lot of kind of like a cat and mouse, you know,
Yeah,
just this lighter texture piano, and then comes in full orchestra, a little bit of a chase with running 16th notes. See,
that's a good analogy.
yeah. And one thing I want to talk about, with a lot of Haydn works, you'll see changes of texture that kind of mark a noticeable change, you know, in the work. You'll notice they're accompanied with dynamic changes as well. So there's a lot of texture changes that you'll kind of see throughout here.
What I like, and to be honest, this recording.
Right,
oh yeah, this recording actually doesn't do the staccatos justice, but in the sheet music, I'm looking at the sheet music now, there's a lot of different staccato pieces in there that I love the use of that, because it totally, to your point, changes that texture. You know, he might do one phrase of it really staccato, and then a couple measures later it's the same exact phrase, but now it's all slurred, right? And so it changes the feeling of, you know.
This recording does sound a little heavier. Who's playing?
This is the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Andre Previn.
Went with Pittsburgh, huh?
Yeah.
Couldn't have gone with like Cleveland
or Philly.
Yeah, local. Okay, so now we've reached the development. This is the next part of a sonata form, which takes those themes, but changes keys a lot. It's just a little bit more edgy.
I love the use of the dynamics here.
You can kind of hear a little bit of that conflict, that loud and soft. With classical music, that's kind of what it was. It was like there's two dynamics in classical music. It's loud or soft.
Yeah, that's probably true.
And then romantic music is similar, but it takes it to the extreme. It's like there's loud, but now there's really loud. And here's soft, but now here's really soft. And Beethoven was kind of one that really, you know, started using those devices a little bit more. So now you hear the material kind of come back without it sounding edgy anymore. So we've reached the end of the development and into what we call the recapitulation, or the reprise, and it's basically bringing back the main ideas. And so, and in classical music, it has a very strong correlation with what's known as the golden mean. And the reprise or the recapitulation usually happens right near that golden mean. And golden mean essentially is, I feel like I should probably let the music play out and I can explain it.
Little hemiola action there.
Right. 3 against 2 rhythmically.
It's actually really hard to play because you get a little confused of where you are in the measure.
Right. When you're looking at the music, yes. The meter shows one thing, but you're feeling something else.
Yeah.
Changes in texture all over the place here.
So, for the benefit of our listeners, when you say changes in texture, what do you mean by that?
Full orchestra versus fewer instruments, louder, fuller sound to, softer, lighter sound.
Got it.
More notes versus longer notes. And there's the completion.
Such a typical Haydn ending too. I don't remember which symphony it is, but there's one where he's got, I don't even know what you call it. You probably know the term for this, but it's da ba 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 ba. Like there's one that just goes on and on and on at the very end. I'm like, oh my gosh, how many of these is he gonna do?
Yes. No, yeah, it's just that's kind of your more classic ending, and then some symphonies will take that to the next level. They're just trying to throw off their audiences, right? Like, is this the end? Oh, this is oh, that was the we're still doing this, yeah. So it's but yes. Okay, so as I was saying about the golden mean, it was so Fibonacci is this guy that kind of discovered that in nature, you'll see it in flowers, you'll see it in kind of just even if you're gosh, how do I explain this really quickly? Because it's a complex thing, but it's basically you see this ratio in nature, and it happens kind of at I think the ratio is 1.618, and that's where you'll see kind of this this cycle kind of repeat itself. But big moments always happen at the 0.618 moment in like a movie or in a lecture or in it's kind of like that pinnacle moment. It always happens in classical music. They almost had that down to a T, to the measure, and Mozart was especially known for it. But here Haydn, the same thing in that particular movement. At the right measure where the golden mean is, the recapitulation comes back to fruition after its developmental section. So you'll just always a fun little feature in sonatas. You'll see that kind of the 2/3 in, that's kind of where you'll start hearing the last, well, I guess a little bit before that 2/3, but you'll hear that last section begin.
So I don't know if I did my math correctly here, but it's 0.618 is around 622. So I'll go at like 615. I'm just curious.
Well, I actually, it's actually in the score rather than
Oh, I see. Yeah, I guess that
the
makes sense.
recording, because you repeat the exposition. So you're
Oh,
you're in the
right,
middle of the
right.
development right there.
Yeah.
So, but that's something that the composer was kind of in tune with at the time, and you see it in the Rococo style of art at the time too. So if you're looking at architecture, you're looking at other art forms, the artists were really in tune with the Fibonacci number, with that golden mean ratio, and so you'll see it in a lot of their artwork. Uh, and so that's where in measure numbers, the golden mean kind of happens right near where that recapitulation happens. But
So
yeah, if the exposition was not repeated, yes, the timing would also be at the same exact moment as well. But we repeated the exposition at the beginning.
so do you think, and maybe you said this already and I missed it, but is that something that that Haydn as a composer um like planned for, like, and kind of mathematically figured out, or is it
Right.
something where it kind
Actually,
of just happens? Like,
happens. I think there was intent at the time
hmm,
to put it near. Yes.
interesting.
Um, I think, but before or after, I think a lot of people, um, even today, artists or composers or, you're, I suppose they're aware of the golden mean, but it happens a lot by accident. I'll give you an example. I used to teach a class um, um, that was 2 hours long, and uh, the Fibonacci sequence. It's basically, what is it? It's repeating. It doubles. Oh gosh, I'm doing a terrible job of explaining it, and my professors would be so mad at me. Um, I have to look it up. When you repeat the sequence, it's just a repeated sequence of like doubling numbers. So it's like one, like
It's like
0,
adding, it's
1,
like
and then
adding the
you
number before
add
it.
the previous number. That's what it is. That's what it is, right? And so it's like, so essentially 90 minutes is a Fibonacci number. And so this 2 hour class that I would teach, right at the 90-minute, you'll notice that all of their attention just starts, you know, yeah, you completely lose your kids, your students' attention at the 90-minute mark. So that's when I would always like, okay, let's do something different, or let's switch it up, or let's play a game, or so something like that. But um, that's a Fibonacci number in the 2 hour lesson that I taught, and so I would always have to be attentive to that and creative in that moment. So it just happens with your attention span is drawn to this ratio as well. So yeah, I think people by accident, if you look at movies, look at the golden mean of like every movie, and more than not, you'll see something really pinnacle happen at that golden mean. And I think it's mostly by accident.
It's really it's really interesting. I think we talked about it in one of our previous episodes, but I feel like I'm learning about it again.
Sorry, I guess I already brought that up.
No, it's I
But
mean
I
it's
bring it up
good because it
because of
applies like, you know, to
because it applies especially to classical composers. Yes.
yeah.
Okay. Should we do a quick little recap of whiskey, cigar? What are you noticing?
Yes. So this cigar is going pretty slowly. So I still have like I mean a good amount. I don't even know how long we've been going. I have a timer here, but I didn't start it until way like we were already way into it. But um yeah, I mean this cigar I'm probably going to be smoking for at least another
25
hour and a
minutes in.
half. But it's
But
good.
yeah,
I
you
mean it's
said 660. Is that what it is?
660. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a big one. It's good though. It's let's see. So do you ever retrohale your cigars?
I'm forgetting.
So the retrohale is when you take a puff in, of course you don't, you know, breathe in a cigar, but you take it in and then you blow it out through your nose. And if you do that,
Oh, right.
I don't do it very often because it's honestly like pretty potent, but I do it a little
It's
bit.
abrasive, yeah.
But I do notice that when you do that, the flavors of the tobacco definitely are much more pronounced. Um,
Oh, yeah.
it's kind of like smooth bread is what I'm getting from the cigar. It's really good. It's really good.
Mm.
I've never seen this online. So I typically order from the bid, as I call it, the cigar bid. But this a box of these on Cigars International will run you about 277 for a box of 20. No, 234 for a box of 20. Um, it's a good cigar, really good cigar. What about yours?
Yeah, I think the first third was nice smooth kind of finish. Like I said, kind of buttery, creamy.
We're having some tech issues over. I think we may have lost him. He's frozen on the video.
Hello. Check 1, 2.
Ah, you're back. You're back.
Hello? Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
I
What
think
was
you're
the last
back.
thing I said? I'm sorry, my kids
Well,
are watching television.
ah,
And they're
we
taking all my bandwidth. Um, they so I was saying that the first half was kind of more of a softer, creamy finish, and now this second third takes that. It starts it nice and smooth and buttery, but then it finishes more peppery. So
mm,
it's but I mean it's burning really even, really nice smoke. I'm really happy with it.
and what about your whiskey?
Perfect pairing. Um, I get a little bit of cinnamon from this. Um, it's definitely um, it really goes down like nothing. So I have to be careful because it's almost refreshingly um like drinks refreshingly almost like water. So I have to be careful because I had a pretty good pour and I'm already like almost done with that big pour. So I'm gonna slow down. I gotta finish the show. It's really smooth. It's really nice. I can't say enough about this distillery up in Sonoma. Really great.
I'll have to I'll have to give that a shot. One of the things that I like about, heading back to California in the summertime is being able to try some of the other whiskeys that, for whatever reason, not every distillery sends everywhere. So there's stuff that you
Of
can
course.
get, in California that I can't get here, and then vice versa. There's stuff that they make out here that you can't get in California. So um, when we
Right.
come out to Cali, I try to see what there is, and that Redwood one was very good.
Yeah, well, that's something I've read about kind of our generations of Zennials, Millennials, um, is that we're more interested in trying local things wherever we go, right? And so I'm definitely always more interested in like what's the best local thing here that I can't get anywhere else, right? So when you're in California, try this Redwood Empire. Fantastic. All right, number two.
Number two, Andante. This is the as Patrick mentioned earlier, where it gets his surprise name from.
This will wake you up.
Here it is.
Arpeggiated, very simple. It's used in children's music classes all the time. My wife always uses this example for her kids. Great
We
walking
actually,
exercise.
yeah, we play the.
Wait,
Oh,
wait,
there
wait.
it is. I wonder if anybody was surprised.
And the patron is like, what just happened? That's not normal.
Yeah, we play this in
You don't see fortissimos in classical music. What is this doing here?
yeah. We've done this at home in a string quartet. I just pulled the music from IMSLP and we'll play it together. It's fun. Of course you're missing the wind parts, but it's fun. I like this obligato part over it. I don't know if you call it an obligato, but
Yes, well, this is so the first movement was sonata form. This is what we call theme and variations. So it's the same theme done over and over and over again, but with different changes. So this is the second version.
Okay,
and it's got this nice little counter melody.
Counter melody, there you go.
Yeah, really nice. Shared by the flutes and first violins. The second violins have the melody.
We got the minor section.
Third one. Right.
Coming up, I think, right after this, and I love it. So I guess this would be the fourth variation.
This is the third.
This is the third, okay.
A little key change there. So in theme of variations, basically they become more and more complex as you go. So it's you heard the first variation was very simple children's music like, and now we're all of a sudden
yeah
virtuosic.
And it gets even more complicated with the sextuplets that happen a little bit later.
Right. So again, textures going back and forth. That previous one being really full, virtuosic. Now we're kind of back to light and, you know, frolicking through the hills here.
Yeah. You know, the frolicking, but you still have the original melody underneath by the strings.
Right. Yeah, it features the oboes here and the flute.
So cool. Here's the sextuplet part.
Change in texture, marking, and a change in dynamic, just like Haydn would do. We're in the penultimate variation here.
Those dotted rhythms, just those are your slight variation.
That you're talking about. A little bit change of the theme right there, right?
Yeah. Had that chromatic part of it too.
Mm.
Here's the sextuplets again. It's that part that's like
right. Very dense, full.
That part. I want to know what that's called.
Dominant. That's the dominant chord.
Just okay, but there's
seventh.
Oh, okay.
So you're basically signaling the coda here.
Yeah.
So this is the coda, the final. You can hear the what we call the oh gosh, what was it called? Prolongation of the dominant underneath. Do you hear that in the timpani right now? Boom, 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 boom. Now we're coming to the tonic here.
I love it.
Nice smooth ending, yeah.
The surprise symphony.
Mm.
I think we've definitely been listening to that in the car before. And, you know, I mean, like we just heard, it's very, very quiet at first, right? And then, you know, what, a minute and a half into it or so, you get that massive chord, and there's definitely been people in the car that have jumped like, whoa, what is going on?
Yes, all added on a whim. Like, hey, we gotta wake these people up.
That's so funny. And I wonder, like, when you say it was added on a whim, like, was it, and I mean, I know you weren't there, but like, was it truly a whim where the conductor, you know, so the position,
don't know, like, how far in advance?
Like, I mean, that's crazy because, you know, if you ever play in an orchestra, which I know you have, and of course I do, and the conductor can sometimes, depending on the level of talent that you're dealing with in the orchestra, the conductor can do whatever they want. And sometimes people aren't watching, people don't do what they're supposed to do, you know, might try to give you a cue. And if it's not the way that it was in rehearsal, then, and it's in the performance, people aren't going to necessarily follow. Like, they're going to do what has been rehearsed. So if what you're saying is, not that it's not true, but if what you're saying is true in that it was truly done on a whim at the performance, and that wasn't the way that they rehearsed it, I'm just thinking of, like, the level of musicianship of the people that were playing, because that takes a whole different level of people that can
Well,
completely
I think
deviate, you know?
right. Well, I think it was added before the performance. So like, hey, measure 10 here, guys. Just change that to a fortissimo.
But
We're just
but I
gonna
mean, but even so,
wake up the
like,
front row.
but even so, like, if the conductor had changed something that big in the orchestra that I play in the South Jersey Pops, and he changed it, before we went on stage or whatever, and said, "Hey, measure 10, this is going to be a fortissimo instead of piano or whatever." I mean, half of the people would do it, and the other half of the people would have forgotten. Well, I would say like maybe half the people would have written it in, and of those people that wrote it in, half of them would do it, and half of them would blow right by it like it wasn't even written. Um, so the level of musicianship of the people that were playing at the time, so it's cool.
Yeah, I mean, you have to think at the time, I mean, Haydn was a rock star in London, right? And so that's where this was premiered. So I mean, I think the level of musicianship that you probably had from this orchestra was top notch, right? So
Right.
um I think they were I think they were all kind of in on the joke, like, hey, this is what we're gonna do. This is why we're gonna do it. Oh, okay. I think they were all very excited to add the Fortissimo.
Yeah. Yeah. It's cool. It's really cool. That might be, honestly, Patrick,
Yeah.
that might be my favorite fact that I've learned yet on this show.
Oh, the adding something to,
It's
well, I mean, I think about
he's he's talking, but
student tried to show a lot. Even and my goal is to never sing the same thing exactly the same, twice, to always give it a little bit of variation, to hold this note a little bit longer, or to take this a little bit slower, or to do this maybe a little bit louder, and that's just the art. You kind of um always trying to adjust or do different things while you're performing. So uh I like to feel that we're all in sync, and and watching, um by watching, we can make changes to music together, and be on the same page. And so I think that's a level of musicianship that I expect from my students. Orchestras are similar uh, in it, just like in the art of conducting and choral music. I would think orchestral is the same. I mean, what do you have in your experience? And tell me your experience in orchestral conductors. I'm sure there are conductors that you've had that you've wanted to pay closer attention to than, say, others, where it's like, okay, they're just a pattern here and being showy. I'm just going to play the music like we rehearsed, versus like, oh, okay, he's being ensemble. Do you have an example like that?
I mean, for the conductor, like, so for the orchestra that I play in now, they focus for the most part on just following, throughout the rehearsal well. The only thing that they would really, by the time we get to the concert, I would say the orchestra has a pretty good idea. I mean, hopefully a really good idea of what's going to happen. Um, but there are occasions, because I play in a pops orchestra, where we actually um we have like guest artists that we bring in. Could be Could be a solo singer, could be a
Right.
children's choir, could be a guitarist, solo songwriter, singer songwriter. So the biggest thing that that the conductor will try to control during a performance is going to be the volume. But usually, like, tempos and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's not gonna. It's. I mean, we're not a professional orchestra, So, because we're not a professional orchestra, we don't have we have we don't have very many professional level musicians that would be able to change on a whim. Um,
Mm.
but I don't know if that answers your question. You were breaking up a little bit, but
Yeah. Sorry about that. Um, yeah, it does. I mean, there's some conductors that you see, oh, like they're drawing you in and leading, versus some conductors that, okay, here's your tempo and here we go, and just play or sing the music. And I think I don't I didn't research Haydn's conducting ability, but yeah, I don't
to the
know. It's an overlooked. Am I cutting out again?
just a little bit.
I was just saying it's an overlooked art, conducting, and it has a lot of power to the
Okay. Uh,
I'm
uh,
I'm really sorry. Let's start the third movement. This is a minuet and trio. So that's the form of this next one. And so basically what that means is there's two binary forms, and that are repeated, and then it has this like the third section is what's called a trio, and then you return back to the beginning and you play through the whole thing. And you said it's minutes long. Let's listen.
here we go.
Allegro molto. Which is a bit of a departure from what's normal. Usually they're more presto minuets,
I'm
more
curious
stately, but
what the
this is very dance-like.
I'm curious, and we can talk about it after. What's the difference between a minuetto and a minuet?
I think it's the same. Kind of like a circle of fifth, chromatic progression right there.
There are so many accidentals in that section. It's
Right.
If you're not a great sight reader, that's not easy to sight read.
Yeah.
We can talk about accidentals in our next break here.
was that section you were talking about?
Here's the trio section.
Repeat. Full run through without repeats. Just changes in textures left and right, always accompanied with a dynamic change. These emphasized notes and the woodwinds. Trio.
I have so much to say about
All
this.
right. Go ahead.
So what's interesting about a minuetto trio from an instrumentalist point of view is you have to learn how to play it. So typically in a minuetto trio, you're going to see, and Patrick mentioned this already, but you'll have your first part of the piece that you're going to play. It's usually, well, I don't know if it's usually, but it's you've got part one, you've got part two, and then you've got part three, which is the trio. The part one piece is usually repeated. So you're going to play that first piece. And when we say repeat, in music, we've got this little symbol at the end of a section that basically says go back to either the beginning or where you see another one of those symbols. So it's kind of like, you might be, let's see, you might be playing music this way, and then there'll be a symbol here for repeat. You're going to pass that, and then you're going to wait till you see the next part of it. So here's the repeat. You're going to go back to that first repeat and then play that. So what happens is you've got the first section where you're going to play through that. You're going to repeat that first section. Then you're going to move on to the second section. You're going to play that section. Then you're going to repeat that section. Then you've got the trio section, and the trio section has its own little repeat portions. So the first part of the trio you repeat, the second part of the trio you repeat just the second part, and then it has this, it says MEN period DC, which means da capo, which, you know, when you're a learning instrumentalist, that refers to what they call the head. And so you go back to the top of the piece. But the tricky part is when you go back to the top of the piece, you're not repeating everything the way that you would normally repeat it. You're going to blow through all the repeats and pretend that they don't exist, right? And then the end of the piece is right before the trio. So you actually end the piece, when you're looking at the sheet music, you end the piece in the middle of the page. And so as an instrumentalist, learning how to play the sheet music for a minuetto trio, we have to talk about the roadmap a lot, you know, especially if you're a beginning instrumentalist. You have to talk through, okay, you know, everything that I just said, like, and it takes some practice to learn the roadmap, or like the map of where you're supposed to go and when. So it's definitely like a trickier, I don't know, as an instrumentalist, it's trickier. I don't know if it's a type of music or trickier roadmap. So that's one thing. I'll pause there. Thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's that's just part of the understanding forms of music, especially in different eras. But classical period was especially known for, okay, this is what we do, and this is the roadmap, and it's honestly, it's just to not print out so many pages of music. So
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
like, just play that again, and then let's go on to the next section. Let's play that again. You know, but
yeah. Or I
you
guess
know,
like
the minuets. Sorry, go
I,
ahead.
I was just going to say, prior to printers, it was so that you didn't have to write the same thing over and over again, right?
Yeah, that's a interesting thought. Yeah, it's probably a relief for the composer. Like, "Oh, I'm gonna do a minuet trio, so I don't have to write new material. I can just repeat what I already wrote." You know, but yeah, I mean, it's meant to be simpler in form, something easy to listen to, something more recognizable for the listener, and you know, as a performer, yeah, you have to be more attentive to the roadmap, but in the end, it's actually a simpler output, right?
Yeah,
And
like,
very, and it's always in 3/4, and so that means, you know, it's waltzy in the sense
right.
that it has the sense of a dance, you know, and that it can be um, paired with a dance, or can be paired with any other, you know, it just pairs well with other forms because it's simpler in its form. And I'm unstable again, so I apologize. Should
I
we go on to
noticed.
number 4?
Well, so yes, um, a couple more comments though, and I'm curious to hear your take, especially as a from a conductor standpoint. Well, the first part of it is we talked about accidentals. Or I mentioned accidentals while we were listening to that excerpt, and for our listeners, what an accidental is a piece of music may be written, and we'll take the key of C major as an example. If you picture a piano, C major is basically all of the white keys. So you don't have to play any of the black keys. That's those those
That's what we call
pitches.
diatonic.
Yeah, diatonic scale. Those pitches, the black key pitches in the key of C, are not there. However, if the composer at one point, especially in the development section of a piece, would want you to play some of those black keys, then those are what's called accidentals. So typically in the key, as an example, typically in the key of C, an F would be natural. So you would just play an F as it is on the piano. So that's the, you know, the first note prior to the three black notes on a piano. If the composer wanted it to be an F sharp in a particular instance, then that's going to be a half step raised tone right from F. So that's going to be an F sharp, and it's going to be that sharp piece of it is what they call an accidental, what musicians call an accidental. So in that section that I was mentioning, where I said there's a lot of accidentals and it's hard to read it, it's because there's a lot of notes that are written with either flats or sharps that are not in the key. And so you really have to read every specific note. Otherwise, you're not going to play it correctly. It would almost be in English if you were reading words and there might be a particular word that had like all these different letter markings on the letters themselves. And because you have that marking, you would pronounce that vowel, let's say, a little differently. Like if we think about going back to our grammar days, right? Like if we think about the word game, it's G-A-M-E, and you don't pronounce the E. Well, in English, let's say that we had a marking on the letter E above the E that somehow showed that you don't pronounce that E. And you also had a marking over the A that showed that you're going to pronounce the A like a long A vowel, game. And let's say that the whole language was written that way. That's what an accidental is. You have to read each individual note to know how to play that particular note. So it's challenging to be able to read through a series of, when you've got a whole passage, a whole section of music that's written purely in accidentals, it like really challenges your ability to be able to read that. So that's one. The other question that I would have for you, Patrick, as a conductor, is in this piece, and I'm sure there's a couple of different copies of the manuscript, but as an example, so there's a lot of grace notes, and I guess for our listeners, I'll define what a grace note is, but a grace note is essentially a little note that you play before the main note. And when I say little note, I mean it literally is like smaller than all the other notes in that measure. There's a lot of grace notes in this music, and when I heard this recording of the Pittsburgh Symphony, they are playing those grace notes as if they are an eighth note in the measure, as opposed to
correct
a note that happens before it. So I can demonstrate. If this is, the melody is ba da 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 da. That's a melody. Right. With the grace note, it's actually ba da ba da da ba ba da da ba 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 da ba. Versus the way that I've typically played this piece, it's ba da ba da ba ba da ba 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 da ba. So I'm just curious, from a conductor's standpoint,
yes,
or maybe from a music, from someone who knows music, like how do you differentiate between those two different types of grace notes?
Okay, well, you have some loaded questions. I'm gonna stop my video because I know my internet's bad, so maybe that'll help with my explanation. Let me start with your latter point, which is about the grace notes, in that it's actually what's stylistic of the time. So we would use grace notes in modern music the way you just gave an example. And that would be stylistic of today. But in classical time, they actually gave equal weight to the grace note. The grace note being like the non-chord tone. Basically the emphasized note is the second. And so they would emphasize that second note, but they would play them equally in duration, meaning the same amount of time. So actually, the way this Pittsburgh orchestra has performed it is actually correct to what's stylistic of Haydn's time in the classical era, where you would give equal weight and duration to those grace notes. Okay. So they're written that way essentially to show the emphasis of the second note, but really you're playing them equally. Now, in today's time, we would play them kind of how you gave an example by still emphasizing the second note, but giving less time duration to the previous, the grace note, the smaller note. So that's to answer that grace note question. And for your chromaticism, yeah, I think when you're reading, so chromaticism, where you use the word accidental, sharps and flats, notes that aren't in the key that's written, you're basically traveling to different keys. You're traveling to neighboring worlds related. It's like traveling. So let's say the key is the United States of America, but we're going to travel to Canada just for a second. Um, and then we're going to go to Nova Scotia, and then shoot, let's go down to Mexico, and shoot, let's just go down further to South America, So that's kind of that. You always choose neighboring keys. You're not going to choose something that's completely, especially in this era in classical music, you're not going to choose a key from the United States and then fly to China and then back to, you're going to choose more neighboring keys. So I like to think of it as key changes. When there's accidentals, you're changing the tonic, you're changing the do. And so I'm going to read that. To help with my reading, I'm actually going to analyze them. What keys are we playing here? If it's from C, like you gave an example, I'm going to travel to, like the key of G, which is a neighboring it's the dominant of C. So that's like saying the United States to Mexico. And then we're going to travel to F, and that would be like going up to Canada. Okay. So I'm going to look at those different accidentals and think the tonic, and then I'm going to analyze that and see, oh, I'm just playing an F chord here. Oh, now I'm playing an E flat chord here. And so that helps with reading it quicker. But yeah, I mean, you would see more chromaticism and developmental sections, trios, uh, those more topsy-turvy sections that we were referring to earlier in the podcast.
Makes sense. Yeah, I'm looking at the sheet music now as you were talking, and it looks to me it's actually, this is written in G major. But when we get to that section where there's a lot of accidentals, I think it's morphing to E flat major.
Right.
So I guess you're right. Like if you think about, when you get to that section, if you were to think about it in E flat major, then all of a sudden the accidentals go out the door. I'm curious,
So
like, why they would not write that section in E flat major just to make it easier for the reader.
yeah, but if you're looking at a developmental section and every 2 measures you change the key signature, that's just annoying for the
Yeah,
reader.
that's true.
And that's where music literacy and music theory knowledge really helps with your reading ability.
Yeah. All right. Last and final movement is the finale.
Yes.
And it is finale allegro di molto.
Mm-hmm. And so all these terms are basically, if you haven't caught on, are tempo markings essentially, or allegro mean fast. And what was the previous one? Allegro molto. So that previous one was also fast, but not as fast as this one. Vivace
Yep.
being really fast, like the first movement. Andante being slower, that was the second movement. So this one, you're going to see just a little increase in tempo, basically, is what it means. Go ahead.
Here we go. This is a really hard movement to play. It's hard.
Well, just hard to play fast, right?
Yeah, I mean those
It's
16th
a lot
notes
of
are
practice.
they're blazing.
When you're Allegro de Moto with 16th notes, yeah, you're going pretty quick. So now we're in the development. It starts like it sounds like you're repeating. And you can hear keys changing, traveling to neighboring worlds. I like this upcoming section in the development right here. It sounds like we're reprising right here.
It does,
right?
yeah. But then no.
Nope. Back to development, right? More undulation, rough texture, loud dynamic, a lot of chromaticism. Now to the recap. Grand pause. A lot of emphasis on the tonic right there. Do, 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 do. That's when you know the end is near. Do, do. So. I like that little bum, 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 bum. The big, loud and or soft and loud ending right there, just to kind of cap off the cat and mouse surprise, interplay throughout the whole work. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. He wrote some other pretty notable work during this time that also have names. Military was 100, clock was 101, the drum roll was 103. So you're kind of coming to the end of his symphonic, or basically his composition career, and ends with really notable works. Notable because they have names, right? And they're during this time where just freedom to do these commissions, to travel, to experiment. I tend to be a little bit, uh, yeah.
Yeah, it's really good stuff. So the I actually had this CD. There was a CD collection that my mom got for me. I don't know which symphonies it was. I do remember that it was 94, 98 was on there, 102 and 104. It was a 4 CD collection, and gosh, I must have listened to these CDs. I mean, hundreds of times. And so I love these Haydn symphonies, and it's funny because in the classical world, like I mean, people think of, I mean, everybody obviously thinks of Beethoven and Mozart, right? You don't think of some of the, not that Haydn was a smaller composer, but you think of Haydn and Mozart. If you're not familiar with classical music, you kind of think of them as the ones that wrote all the symphonies, right? Because that's the ones that everybody knows. Um, but Haydn's got some really great stuff, and it's a little more on the classical side for sure. Like it's, as opposed to Romance era. So the the music I think is a little more, I don't want to say predictable, but it's a little more, everything is kind of in key, as opposed to the Romance era where like Sibelius is from the Romantic period, and it's a little more, and Glazunov as well. It's a little more um, unpredictable. It's a little more, you're not really
Right.
sure where things are going. But in Haydn's period, it's definitely a little more structured. It's a little more, um, I mean, I've said it already, but kind of predictable. But still, really great stuff. Just solid
Well, yeah, I
writing.
mean, that's why you sleepy patrons, right, in the 1790s, right? And it's like, okay, it's the classical movement. Yeah, it is predictable, but that was the whole thing. It was like, this is the pinnacle of high art. We can perfect music, it almost mathematically. Like that's an example of the golden mean. Like that's the whole point, is how can we make this music as concise, precise, um, and mathematically appropriate. But at a point here in the 1790s, it was like, okay, like you just said, maybe it's a little predictable here, and that's the point of the surprise. It's okay, let's throw in some fortissimos here, right? Let's throw
Hmm.
in a little bit
Hmm.
of this, and then enter Beethoven, and okay, let's change the game even more. And so he wrote with just a little bit more rashness, um, as well, and eventually enter in, the Romantic period, your Schumanns, your Schuberts, and then Mendelssohn's. I mean, Mendelssohn was very classicist, but kind of paved the way for Romanticism as well. And then that's where, yeah, you get bigger orchestras, you get bigger sound, um, you get extra softs, you get the form isn't as structured. You get more chromaticism. Instead of traveling to neighboring countries in key, like we were talking about traveling from the States to neighboring keys like Canada, like your C to F major or to G major. Now you're traveling to a lot more. In Romanticism, it was a lot of mediant relationships. So like it's traveling from C to E, or traveling from C to A. So it just changed the listeners. You're always trying to keep your listeners on toes, and keeping them tuned in. Right, we got to change things up. And then Romanticism happened, and then that went to the 20th century, and then shoot, if you research the early 20th century, I mean, you get your Schoenbergs, you get some weird music. They return to mathematical music, but in almost in an atonal sense, right? So, I mean, music's always morphing, it's always moving, it's always reinventing itself, right? And so during this time, Haydn was trying to reinvent a little bit, you know, and um, but that's what music is. It's always morphing.
So of these four movements, what would you say is your favorite?
I asked Alexa to play Haydn Symphony 94, and it went straight to the second movement.
Yeah, sure.
I'm like, no, the Alexa, the whole symphony, like I want the whole symphony, I couldn't convince Alexa to play it for me. Um, but gosh, um, I'm not one for favorites. The whole work is great. Every movement's got its own little character to it. Um, Thematically, the last movement is my favorite. So I really enjoy the very fun theme for me. I enjoy listening to a good melody. So the first movement, the melody is four measures long at the very beginning. Four measures. So that's some of the criticism that some of the critics were writing about with the symphony. Play it back again. I'm unstable, so I'm going to stop my video. But you right after the introduction, you hear four measures of a theme that's immediately interrupted by, was it 16th runs? And so that one was, that is speaking of kind of keeping your listeners a little bit more on their toes. It was a little bit different in that it wasn't your kind of like this main memorable theme. It was more just texture writing than it was melodic. But you get a little sense of that melody in the last two, the third minuet in trio and the last one.
Yeah, I think I'm a fan of the fourth movement as well. That it's a nice melody and all the I mean, being a string player, especially being a violinist, we get all the fun parts, especially if you're a first violinist like I am. You get all the fun parts. And the fourth movement definitely has that all over it for sure. What are we doing next? I don't think we've talked
Yeah,
about this
we
yet.
we haven't talked about it. We have a list, but we haven't decided what we're gonna nail down. Um, but we've done a lot of romantic. We threw in some classical this time. With Ron's deal, we did some contemporary choral. Yeah, so I don't know. I am really my jam is mid-century choral. So there's
Yeah.
some really phenomenal stuff in that era that I'd love to talk about for sure. But I don't know. I mean, there's a lot on our list, so we'll definitely talk about it.
All right. Well, I think that wraps it up for us today. Hope you enjoyed the discussion, the music, and your cigar and your drink.
If you have any questions, comments, suggestions for other pieces or other works you want us to look at, please reach us out questions at opusrobusto.com. You can also find us on Facebook and the website at opusrobusto.com. And until next time, listen to an opus and smoke a Robusto.
Good night, everybody. Thanks.
Cheers.